Hi everyone, this is Pradeep from Sydney, kicking off episode 27 of GCC. Yet again, we've got some people who are making a mark globally and in very, what should I call it, topical issues. So, whom do we have today? We have, although, let me be the gentleman once again and introduce the ladies first. Although I may take up Sumant before, because he's got some interesting perspectives that I want to share. First and foremost, let me introduce Ritu. Ritu Garg, who did a PhD from IIT Delhi and is currently working with Intel and blending artificial intelligence in a work at Intel. More about what does Ritu do later on. But please give a big round of applause to Ritu. And the second lovely lady we have is Indu. Indu has also done her PhD from IIT Delhi, and she is the dean at what used to be earlier called Delhi College of Engineering and is now called Delhi Technological University or Institute or something like that. And she looks after student welfare, but her area of interest into intelligent transportation, and there's a lot of work which these girls collaborate among the ex cohort of PhDs from different batches from IIT Delhi. And more about Indu later on, but please give a big round of applause to Indu. And lastly, and not the least, we have Sumant. Sumant is very well known within the IIT Delhi or the community that we have had him earlier before as the founder, chairman, and CEO of India's largest renewable energy company called Renew Power. That I have invited him today is because he recently took over as the president of ASSOCHAM. Now, ASSOCHAM we know is one of the three major industry and trade associations of India. Now, what that means is that now his focus is no longer renewable energy or for that matter renew power, but it is a broader focus from an association perspective. But that is not to say that Sumant has not been involved in a broad decision making or consensus building global roles. He has been very actively involved with the World Economic Forum in the recently concluded COP26 talks, and he's got some very fancy titles over there, which if I start going into, but let's give him a big round of applause. And we are really delighted to have somebody of his caliber today on the platform. And if my lovely ladies do not mind, can I kickstart the discussion with Sumant? For the
Yes,
reason that there are some interesting themes that I want to pick up on, and the session may take a bit longer. So, with that, once again, a big welcome to Sumant. Sumant, you are no stranger to building consensuses. So, how does this current role at ASSOCHAM, what do you feel? What are your thoughts about it? What do you see as the opportunities and challenges as the president of ASSOCHAM?
yeah. Well, Pradeep, first of all, thank you so much for having me on GCC for a second time. It's truly a pleasure to be with you again, and I must really thank you for the work that you're doing in putting these conversations together, and so that the people that you get is quite remarkable. And I think it makes all of us realize that we're part of something truly unique, which is this whole IIT Delhi community and network. And there are some fabulous, outstanding phenomenal people who've done some great things. And it's I think just an affirmation of the fact that we took the right decision so many years ago when all of us decided to go to IIT Delhi. So I think kudos to you for putting it all together so consistently. Um, to your question of ASSOCHAM, look, ASSOCHAM is an industry body, as you said, one of the three national industry bodies along with CII and FICCI. And the purpose of these industry bodies essentially is to try to get a dialogue, a deeper dialogue going between the government on the one side and corporates on the other side. Because ultimately, we need to make sure that policy making is as interactive, as responsive as it can be. And therefore, we have, for example, 72 committees across different areas of industry and business. And these committees engage with their respective counterparts in the government on a regular basis. We give inputs before the budget, for example, to the government on what we think after getting feedback from all of our members as to what the government could be doing from a budget standpoint. And of course, then there are ongoing policy issues and interventions where we keep having those conversations on a regular basis. The couple of distinguishing characteristics as far as ASSOCHAM are concerned are number one, that unlike both the other national chambers, we have a very broad set of MSME members, almost 450,000 MSME members. And that therefore allows us to give a bit of a slightly different insight to the government on what's happening at the grassroots of the Indian economy, or from the corporate standpoint, and and that I think gives us a seat at the table in conversations with the government, because they do want to understand how their policies will impact all the MSMEs, which is really where a lot of the job creation and a lot of the economic activity takes place. The second differentiating factor about ASSOCHAM is that we are a collection of a lot of regional chambers as well. So the Bombay Chamber, the Indian Merchants Chamber, the Chamber in Calicut, the Chamber in Calcutta, all of these are our members as well. And so we are able to get more regional feedback as well and channelize that into the government also. And so that's really the role of these chambers. And in a country like India, where the government still has such an enormous influence on business and what's happening in the corporate sector, having these open channels of communication is actually very, very critical. And so that's really the role that we at the chamber at ASSOCHAM are meant to play, which is to bridge that divide between the government and corporates.
So I understand the advocacy side.
Hmm.
That is very much a role for any major association to look at the major stakeholders. But what I'm also keen to understand is that you brought about the differences, that you got a large percentage of members which are MSMEs. But there are so therefore pressures and pulls within the association itself. So how do you best manage that?
Yeah, so look, that's obviously a very critical issue, because within the chamber, there are all sorts of members. And on any given topic, you may have members having very different points of views, and reconciling those and trying to create a common minimum point of view that we can then advocate is oftentimes not possible also. And so in those cases, if there is a stalemate, then you just have to, as a chamber, take a neutral stance and say that, look, on this issue, we have division between our own members, and therefore we can't go to the government with a specific clear-cut point of view. And that's really what we have to do in some cases. But that's not that common. In a number of cases, in most of the cases, the entire industry tends to be more aligned, and therefore some of these things are a little bit easier to manage.
So would you say that this is a similar kind of a play as what happens maybe at Student Affairs Council at IIT Delhi or something like that, where you got different pressure groups and you're trying to manage those?
It's partly like that. The only thing is that at the Student Affairs Council and IITD, you've probably got more passion to play, right? And you are much more invested in it. Here, you're less invested because, it could be some totally different sector which has nothing to do with you personally. And so you're trying to, play judge and jury or whatever. And if it works out, fine. If it doesn't work out, it's fine too, right? It's not as if
Understand.
your hostel might benefit or not benefit, or something else might happen. And so it's
So
a
there
little
was
bit.
no lovely, I love it. Now, you see, one of the other things is that I understand that between the three associations, Um, I tend to call it ASSOCHAM and you call it ASSOCHAM, but whatever the pronunciation be,
Mhm,
this association has a very strong focus in Make in India, which has
mhm.
been there much before the government took it over as Make in India as a priority. Is that correct?
I think that would be the general approach of the industry in India has been that we should be doing more manufacturing in India.
Hmm.
So I think that would be something that most of the industry chambers would have been lobbying for in general in the past.
So there was a difference because when you look at something like CII, which is representative of the corporate sector, they have a
Mhm,
different vested interest as compared to the medium to small scale industry, and that's
mhm.
where it comes down to. As president of ASSOCHAM, you also have to manage relationships with CII and FICI and so many other bodies.
Yeah.
So does that become a challenge?
Not really, because it's ultimately we're all in the same boat as industry together, and very frequently the same corporates are members of all three chambers. I was myself, by the way, very deeply involved in CII for many years as well. I was the head of the northern region, northern India for CII, and headed many committees for them as well. So I know all the folks there quite well. So I wouldn't say that the relationship is antagonistic in any way. Ultimately, look, what is it that all of us are trying for? We are all trying to give the government advice to grow the economy as fast as possible because a rising tide lifts all boats. And so that's the best solution, which is totally neutral, which is egalitarian, and which is helpful for everybody. So that I think has to be the common effort of all the chambers. And then, of course, within that, there could be some people who are lobbying for this, some people lobbying for that. And that's fine. I think that's par for the course in these kinds of things, as you said.
And now come to another aspect, which
Mhm.
is in terms of areas like sustainability, inclusion, etc. So, by very nature, you see, these associations can be bureaucratic at times. At
Mhm.
one end, you have the elected representatives, and one hand, you got the bureaucracy over there who's actually implementing, though they are technically supposed to be working under the elected leaders. How do you find their approach towards issues like inclusion, sustainability, and how best do you kind of promote these?
So, sustainability now is a very, and I would say even inclusion are very well accepted themes now. And nobody will stand in the way of doing what is right to propagate these themes. And so, therefore, whether it is the chamber bureaucracy, whether it is the government bureaucracy or government ministers, everybody's, I think, more or less talking the same language. The question only is how to get there. So, objectives are aligned. The issue is what can, for example, a chamber do in helping the government push forward the sustainability agenda, or what can it do on pushing forward the inclusiveness agenda. And those are conversations that we have with the government, of course. But I would say that there is widespread acceptance that these are very, very important topics and they have to be pushed forward. So, for example, for ASSOCHAM this year, and by the way, the reason I call it ASSOCHAM is because it's the Associated Chambers of Commerce. So
I
that's
know,
the
I
form.
know.
So therefore, the sort of the short form being ASSOCHAM. But look, the fact is that this year the four themes for ASSOCHAM are sustainability, entrepreneurship, empowerment, and digitization. So the empowerment piece covers the inclusiveness. The entrepreneurship obviously gets captured within both digitization and sustainability because those are the two of the biggest areas where you have entrepreneurial activity happening, and so on. So the good, for example, the good thing is that my good friend Sanjeev Bikhchandani of Naukri has agreed to take over the responsibility for heading the startup committee at ASSOCHAM this year. So hopefully he'll be able to bring a very different kind of energy, a very different kind of understanding and appreciation of what is required for the startup world. And that's something that we as an association then will start advocating for under his leadership in that particular area.
So here, when we talk about this, yes, the objectives of everybody are the same. But
Mm-hmm.
let's take, for example, sustainability.
Yeah.
And just before we were discussing, Australia and the similar issues kind of come up, because sustainability has to be balanced against growth. And not only balanced against growth, but against inclusive growth.
Mm-hmm.
So those kind of issues which are happening at a global level, do you see those kind of challenges happening at a local level or at an association level, which means that some industries which are getting more highly impacted are not so much in favor of sustainability. So, what are your takes on that?
Yeah, so sustainability is a very broad topic, Pradeep.
Yes.
Given that there are areas around the energy transition, how do you make that happen? There are areas around how do you create a circular economy? How do you improve carbon emissions from the agricultural sector, from the hard to abate sectors as well? So it's a very broad sort of an area. Within that, I would say there are clear areas where everybody agrees. For example, the need for more clean energy. I don't think anybody disputes that. Plus, clean energy has become cheaper than anything else. And so, therefore, clearly, all companies would be happy to migrate to clean energy. The question is for some of the more tougher things for them to do. Are those where the cost might actually be higher? Are they willing to undertake those efforts or not? And that's where the conversation gets a little bit more difficult and trickier. And that's really where the government needs to step in and very categorically say that, look, we are going to put in place, let's say, for example, as a policy measure, a price on carbon. And so anybody who emits carbon is going to have to pay for it. And the reality, Pradeep, is that whether India does it or not, the Western world will do it. And the Western world is going to say that any steel, for example, coming from India into, let's say, the European Union shores will now have to pay this carbon border adjustment tax. So they will do those kinds of things.
I couldn't
So,
agree more with you, but you've
yeah.
got,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
sure.
So we will have to go along with those kinds of things as well. So I think on those, of course, industry will kick and scream, but I think we have to move them along as best as we can. It's in their best interest as well, eventually to be longer term competitive and to make the transition happen faster than later. Now, what is happening is that the reason this is, to my mind, not incompatible or antagonistic with societal requirements from an inclusiveness standpoint is because all of this is good for everybody's health. It's good from an air pollution prevention standpoint, and it's also good for creation of jobs and creation of jobs in a very different way. For example, if we start now installing rooftop solar solutions on a retail basis, that will create millions of jobs all across India, right? Now, of course, what will happen is that some communities which are, let's say, into coal mining, those will get disadvantaged because they'll suddenly not be mining as much coal, but job creation will happen in some other part of the economy. So the question really for policymakers is, and this is where we have to try to help as a chamber, is how do we identify which are the pockets where jobs will be lost and which are the areas where jobs will be created? Is there a net gain in job creation? And there definitely will be. And then how do we transition people into this new economy? So those are the kinds of questions that we have to really address.
I couldn't agree more again with you. But at a higher strategic and a policy level, it sounds very easy. But if you have to
Mm-hmm.
balance it against the Maslow's need hierarchy model, where
Mm-hmm.
you've got a large percentage at the bottom of the pyramid, which doesn't even have money to eat and drink or live for that matter. So
Yeah.
where are we going to talk in terms of sustainability to that particular person? How do you get that level of awareness? So that these are some of the issues which are coming up. Now, but on the same, taking the same thing at a global level, you are in leadership positions in the World Economic Forum and whole lot of other places. You are an active player. Now, in those kind of roles, were you representing the world? Were you representing India? Or how were you getting the consensus between the developed and the developing countries?
There is no dichotomy here because now what's happening is that the world is realizing that the faster you transition and those countries that transition faster will be able to develop industries that can then service the rest of the world. So here there is a massive economic opportunity uh, to become a leader in this new emerging green economy area. To me, it's one of the, let's say, the two biggest opportunities globally right now. And therefore, the fact that the Indian government has taken a fairly proactive view of this energy transition is actually very good because now it's helping create an industry domestically which can then become an exporter to the rest of the world. And to give you a case in point, for example, solar manufacturing today, 90% of the world's solar panels are made in China, and the entire back end of the value chain is also sitting in China. Now, one of the things that the whole Russia-Ukraine war has thrown up is energy security. And there are lots of conversations now going on about how do we now focus on energy security rather than just minimizing cost. Now, in that situation, you have the whole world being dependent on on the clean and for the clean energy transition and the whole area of green hydrogen just in one country, which is China, is a very dangerous position to be in. Uh, of course, there are geopolitical issues, but there are also issues like COVID. You know, if the economy there shuts down, then what happens to the rest of the world's plans to add capacity in solar? And so, therefore, now India can emerge as an alternative destination for manufacturing solar modules. So, the Indian government is now shutting down imports from China through tariff barriers. They're giving incentives for domestic manufacturing. There will be a 40-50 gigawatt industry that will get developed in India as a result. And we can now start exporting modules from India to the US or to the European Union. And for them, it's a great diversification of their supply chain. So those kinds of opportunities now are becoming much more viable. And in the conversation that I now have with developers like ours sitting in those parts of the world, they are looking for supply sources outside of China.
See,
And
these are absolutely fabulous thoughts. But you see, the challenge really comes about is you look at what is happening as a result of the Ukraine war. Coal prices have gone through the roof. Fossil
of
fuel has
course,
gone through the roof. And you see,
yeah,
even though, and that has also happened as a result because investment has stopped into these areas or slowed down in these areas. And what
partly,
that means is
yes.
the dependency on these fuels is going to be there for a hell of a lot. And there is a discussion about who's going to pay for the transition to the green economy. So are these coming
Yeah.
as
No, these are very, very real issues. And the thing that most people don't realize is that price is driven not just by demand, which is likely to decline for fossil fuels, but also by supply.
exactly?
And so if everybody knows the demand is going to fall and nobody invests in supply, then obviously you'll have supply shocks and prices going up, right? So the reality is that this energy transition is going to be very hard to manage, and we will have periods of supply shocks like this. There is no question. Now, this is, of course, being driven by a much bigger macroeconomic, geopolitical factor that is magnifying the whole energy shock. But you will have a lot of volatility in fossil fuel pricing in the future because exactly of this reason. But demand secularly will keep declining. So therefore, there are two solutions that we need. Number one, in the short run, and I was at the International Energy Agency conference in Paris a couple of weeks ago, and the whole conversation was about how in the short run can we just increase supplies of fossil fuels, right? By investing, doing whatever we have to do, because we need that supply immediately. But in the longer run, in the medium and longer run, how do we scale up the whole clean energy bit much, much more? Because that's within your borders and so on and so forth. And so therefore, I think that's the way the world is going to now try to go, which is to accelerate the transition towards clean energy and now to green hydrogen as rapidly as possible over the next 10, 15, 20 years. So you'll see a much more investment happening in those areas. And by the way, green hydrogen is now emerging as this, very versatile fuel, which is going to take the whole area of renewable electricity, which is really what we have right now, into a much broader energy domain. And therefore, a lot of oil and gas companies will start getting into this area. And the very interesting thing is that renewable energy so far has been tethered by wires because it's really been only in the electricity domain. But now by making hydrogen and putting it, converting it into green ammonia and putting it on ships, you untether it from geographic boundaries. You can now make it like the oil and gas industry where you produce it anywhere and ship it to any other part of the world. And 70% of the cost of making green hydrogen is renewable energy. So it's going to be a whole different, much more expanded part of the market. And I'll tell you one more thing, global corporates are now feeling the pressure of transitioning to, reducing their carbon footprint. The pressure is really increasing. So the number of companies we're talking to who want to procure now more renewable energy, who want to procure carbon credits, who are trying to think about how to go sustainable, that number is increasing dramatically. So frankly speaking, our whole sector is exploding at this point in time in multiple different ways.
Fabulous. In fact, you answered a question which is coming up from Somnath from the audience about green hydrogen, which is a
Mhm.
very, very topical subject. And as
Mhm.
you rightly mentioned, sustainability is a very, very broad term.
Yeah.
And you got to kind of, really look at the building blocks, number of building blocks over there to kind of have a, detailed discussion. There's another question which is coming from Kapil.
Mhm.
He is
Mhm.
asking that are ASSOCHAM and other associations pushing for a carbon tax in India?
No, no. I see, because it's one of those contentious topics, right? Maybe my industry would like to have a carbon tax, but the vast majority of industry will not want to have it. And in fact, even the Indian government will not want to have it because, the Indian government's view right now is that, look, we did not cause the pollution, so why should we pay for the solution, right? Actually, that's a bit of a pithy phrase. Uh, so therefore we don't want to do it, but we do want to take advantage of other countries moving down this path. So yeah, the European world, the US world should certainly impose carbon taxes, but not on Indian companies. Why should we disadvantage Indian companies at this point?
So this has been absolutely fabulous. And on a different note, I do want to cover on renew power also. So
Mhm.
where do you see renew power in say 5 years from now? And I know 5 years is a long time today's world, but where do you see? You've been basically it's been infrastructure player. So do you
Right.
see, vertical integration, horizontal integration? What are the thoughts over there?
The problem, Pradeep, for us is that we are like a kid in a candy store right now. There's
Hmm.
so many things that we can do.
Yeah.
Everything looks very tempting. And so there's a temptation to want to do everything. But of course, we all know from all of our management theory that no, you have to focus and you have to, you have limited bandwidth and so on. But I think, look, to answer that question more seriously, we have so far been, as you rightly said, an infrastructure company focused on setting up and owning wind assets, wind farms and solar farms, and selling power to the distribution utilities in India through the grid. Now, as we go forward, the whole market is changing in multiple ways. Number one, we have to get much broader into the footprint of manufacturing, as well as get closer to the customer, which is into the distribution side. The other thing is corporates are becoming bigger customers of ours. And so we're
Oh.
selling more and more power to corporate customers directly as well, right? The third thing is that green hydrogen is now a massively new area for us. And we have entered into a joint venture agreement with L&T and the Indian Oil Corporation, which are two of the biggest companies in India. We set up a common JV for green hydrogen in India. And IOC, is the biggest consumer of green hydrogen, which is why it's good to have them as part of this JV, because obviously it gives us an anchor into their demand. So that's something that we're already doing. But then green hydrogen, as I said earlier, is a global business. So we have to look at it much more globally. And then this whole thing about the whole corporate landscape changing means that we need to, there's nobody actually, this is such a new area that there's nobody ahead of us.
Mhm.
And, we as a company now, it sort of shocks me to say this, but X of China, we have the largest renewable energy capacity in Asia with our close to 10 gigawatts of capacity. So we are a good sized player now, even globally. So the question is, how can we take advantage of all of that and really get into a lot of these areas? So we're trying to get a more investing mindset, not do everything ourselves, invest in people, entrepreneurs who can then help us create businesses, get into a lot of the adjacencies. And over time, therefore, 5, 7 years later, hopefully we're a very different company from what you see right now. Our core will still be infrastructure investments, but I think beyond that, you'll see a lot more digital, a lot more marketing to customer, to corporate customers. Hydrogen will become a much bigger aspect of our play. Technology and manufacturing will become a much bigger aspect of our play. So I think it's going to be a very vastly different company a few years down the road.
And I couldn't agree more with you that at this particular point in time, there are so many different, sectors which are so attractive, from all perspectives. Now, one question is that from the Scandinavian countries are
Mhm.
relatively ahead of the world in hydrogen as well as in sustainability initiatives. So,
Mhm.
so, is there any kind of lessons learned from them or transfer of technology from that part of the world? Do you think that makes sense for India?
Yeah, it does absolutely. Wherever they have technology and we can either acquire that technology or we can partner with those firms, that's something we should absolutely look at doing. And we are seeing that certainly happening in the area of electrolyzers. There are several companies in that part of the world that one it makes sense to tie up with. The same thing on battery technologies as well. There are a few companies like Northvolt in Sweden that it's sensible to partner with because they're doing work on the technology side. So yeah, absolutely. And plus, they also have some of the biggest investors in this space, and so therefore you can actually get capital from there as well.
So, the last question of the day from my side, and I'll ask the audience if they've got some more questions to ask you, comes to governance. You
Mhm.
see, the broad term ESG is very much, in discussion, and there is a whole lot of legislative framework which is happening. But we all know that governance in emerging economies has always been an issue. And
Hmm.
when you look at what is happening in the broad economy today, you
Hmm.
find that the startup component or the small to medium industry component is absolutely exploding. So, governance in this kind of an environment, what are your thoughts? Especially, we are seeing so many examples of governance coming up. We've got the CEO of a national stock exchange, who believes in a guru, and you've got a whole lot of, startups who are unicorns and all that, who's now we are finding stories about, the wife was appointed to do something, something. So, what are your thoughts about that, and how do we bring about this change?
Look, I think that on the positive side, governance in India, corporate governance particularly, has improved vastly from the last over the last 20, 30 years. So I think in general, the situation is really a lot better. SEBI has been pretty sort of strong on requiring majority independent directors for listed companies. And now, by the way, they've come out of the very nice disclosure standard for sustainability, which is very, very intense and probably among the most deepest from any regulator anywhere in the world, and so on. So I think by and large things have improved a lot. Having said that, you will have, Indian society is what it is, and I think the corporate sector is a reflection of societal norms at some level also. So I think we need all of civil society to improve its moral fiber as well. And as that happens, you'll probably see an even bigger improvement on the corporate side. I think you'll always keep, in a large country like India, you'll always keep seeing a few of these kinds of issues, coming to the fore. Unfortunately, you can't do much about that.
Absolutely lovely. You see, Sumant, what really I enjoyed was your passion. The intensity with which you speak, that is what and translates through Zoom. You can feel it, and the humbleness of in spite of whatever you achieved. So let me ask other people across in the room. Does anybody else have any question? If you do have, either you can put it in the chat or raise your hand. So do that now. Uh, Sumant may or may not be there for the rest of the session. Of course, we'd love him to be there. But if you got any questions, please raise out. And I also wanted to comment, you mentioned in the beginning about how GCC has evolved and simply exploded. It is because of people like you, who have, very generously come and spend time and share and be frank and kind of, in the same kind of environment. So it's absolutely fabulous to look at that. So, any questions from the audience? Any more? No. If that be the case, then a very,
I have a question.
who's
Benjamin has
that?
a
Can you please introduce yourself and ask the question?
Hi all, my name is Benjamin, Ashok Benjamin Atumali. I'm a 2010 graduate, BTech Mechanical, Jwalamugi Hostel. I live in Copenhagen now,
Mhm.
and I'm very interested in this topic of green hydrogen, especially because Denmark and Norway and Sweden to a certain extent, they are trying to lead this, and I am in this industry. And one of the things they say is that we have to pay for renewable energy, which always costs extra in Europe or more in Europe than power based on natural gas or coal. Whereas in India, we've been able to crack it in the sense solar and wind is cheaper than all the fossil fuel based power. So is that in that sense, is it possible for Indian companies to export green hydrogen, green ammonia at a price that's cheaper than fossil fuels with the current?
I would say the answer to your question is not yet, but it's going to get there very soon. I think give us 2 or 3 years to bring down the costs of electrolyzers and to optimize the cost of the entire value chain,
Mm.
including the shipping costs as well as the storage costs and the conversion and reconversion into ammonia and so on. I think it'll take us a few years to get to that, but eventually you're absolutely right. And as I said earlier, green hydrogen is going to be a global business, and so therefore, you don't have to manufacture the green hydrogen in Denmark or in any other European country. It can probably,
Mm.
by the way, be even shipped from Northern Africa. It's probably going to be
Mm.
cheaper to ship it from Northern Africa than even from India. So what we are now doing, Benjamin, is that we are looking at all the different parts of the world where you can actually produce green hydrogen and what is the relative cost in all of these geographies. And then it could be that, let's say, the Middle East is the cheapest source because land is cheap and so on. And you'll also have to look at constraints like transmission lines and storage facilities and port facilities and so on. So we'll have to work the whole thing out. But my feeling is that Europe, with its high energy prices, will certainly not be the cheapest place to make green hydrogen. It'll probably be made Australia, India, Middle East, Northern Africa, and one of these places is probably going to be cheaper.
Okay.
So the
Okay.
bottom line, Benjamin, is that you are in Copenhagen, I'm in Australia. So let's talk business. Maybe we can export some, hydrogen from Australia. By the time
Yeah.
Sumant gets up to the speed, No, what lovely question. Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else has any question? So if that be the case, then Sumant, thank you so much. It was absolutely fabulous to have this chat with you. Thoroughly enjoyed the discussion. And it is such a topical and a hot subject because all of us know that this is not a subject that we can leave for a pair, kids or a grandkids. We had the hottest summer in India. We've
Yeah.
seen the floods, which happened in Australia. We've seen the floods which have happened in Germany. We've seen the fires in California. It is hitting us on the, really on the head. The
Yeah.
question really is that are we prepared to pay that, from a utility pricing perspective, are we prepared to pay that extra cost, or how soon will we get at a zero cost sustainable solutions?
Yeah.
It's like if
Yeah.
I'm traveling to, so let's say Copenhagen, or for that matter to India, and I've got a choice of spending $100 on a five-star facility, will I be prepared to pay $150 for a four-star eco-friendly hotel? So these
Yeah.
are some of the fundamental questions which are coming about.
No, listen, thanks so much for having me here. I'm going to be in Copenhagen actually in early May. I think the Prime Minister's there, so I'll be traveling there as well. And I'm going to be in Australia, Pradeep, in Sydney in early to mid July. So if you're in Sydney at that time, let me know.
I'm more than likely I'm going to be there because I have not started my traveling as yet, and then I think I'll be waiting. I just got my fourth booster shot just 2 3 days back, so I'll be waiting for three months, and I'd love to catch up with you in Sydney and
Yeah. Okay.
and have a glass of wine.
Sumant, let us know if you are ever in the US. Love to meet
I,
you.
I'm there all the time. Both my kids are in New York, so yeah. And we are listed on the Nasdaq, so yeah, I do keep coming to the US.
All right.
Sometime we will invite you, and I'm Ahmedabad as well.
Okay, that'll be great. That should be great.
So a
Great talk.
big round of applause for Sumant.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. All. Thank you.
absolutely lovely discussion today. And I look forward to keeping in touch, and especially because this is a very hot topic, very, very hot topic, and you are in the hot seat, both from a company perspective, from an association perspective, and from a global perspective. So once again, bye, and talk to you later. Now we move across, and we've got Indu and Ritu. So, Ritu, let's start with Ritu first. Ritu, could you tell us what has been your journey post IIT, and what are you doing in Intel at the moment?
Yeah, sure. I think I completed.
Your voice is breaking in and out.
Is it? Just a sec. Is it better now?
Yes, it's better, definitely better now.
Yeah. In 2017, I completed my PhD, and post that I joined Accenture. So Accenture was about year and a half, and Accenture being the process that didn't interest me much, though there were very challenging problems, real problems that came my way. But yeah, surely, but Intel was something that I was doing my engineering, my graduate. So year and a half later, I joined Intel. So Intel is a very great place to work. And Intel, what I see is, Intel is an ocean, right? You have number that you can explore, number of things that you can learn. You can build. So be it,
Ritu, your voice is still dropping in and out. Maybe if you come a bit closer. My apologies, but it's kind of.
No, sure. Yeah. So what I was trying to tell is, Intel is is like an ocean, and it gives you a lot of opportunities to work, to learn around, across different domains, different areas. So what I work at is, I started at Intel being, uh, at Android, how do you test or how do you validate certain workloads on Android based applications. And then I moved on to more hardware specific uh, tools. Like you have uh, your i5, i7, i9. Now you have your i12, right, coming up. So how do you validate? So Intel, at Intel, what I learned was, Intel is a very conservative, very orthodox kind of a place, and they are still evolving. They are still learning how, machine learning and AI could be adapted. They can adapt to those newer techniques and help themselves to, improvise and reduce their time to market, and speed up their things. So at Intel, predominantly I work with the validation teams, so where they validate certain components, their motherboards, their chipsets, everything like that. So how, you can apply machine learning into that and help them in validating certain scenarios, certain environment in very particular environments.
So
Like
the
we
way I
work.
look at it is that you are in a very big opportunity space at the moment. India is looking towards becoming a center for chip manufacturing or as a global center for chip manufacturing. And here you are with a dominant player globally, and here you are blending artificial intelligence in your role. But I'm looking at you, although you have done your PhD, but I'm looking at you as an industry person. Let me switch tacks and let me have a quick chat with Indu because I want to get industry and academia perspectives and how do they lead into the startup ecosystem, because today everybody wants to
Correct.
be a startup.
Correct.
So let me go across to Indu. Indu, how are you?
Really good, sir.
So
Thank you
Indu,
for giving this opportunity.
Lovely to have both of Ritu and you over here on this platform today. Tell us about your journey post IIT Delhi.
Sir, actually, I started as a faculty member in Delhi College of Engineering, and then I registered as a part-time PhD in IIT Delhi, and I completed PhD under Professor Shantanu Chaudhary in 2012. And later, because PhD was required for many promotions, I became associate professor, and all. That journey has continued, and because of that positions, I got like higher administrative positions also, like head of the Department of Electronics and Communication Engineering for 3 years, and later now I am working as Dean of Student Welfare of Delhi Technological
So,
University.
in other words, you have been with DCE or DTU for quite some time now. Would
Yes.
that be right?
Yes, from like
So,
maybe for
by the way, do you
20
know
years,
that
20.
Shantanu had also registered for the session today? Because you
Yes,
see,
yes.
he's got so many
Please.
of his PhD students who are now in prominent positions. So, let me ask you, as I mentioned, that Ritu is, as I take it from the industry, and here you are in a leadership position in academia. Now, this new education policy or NEP 2020 has come out. Now,
Yes.
could you tell us what is this? What I keep reading about is that, wow, this is absolutely fabulous. It gives a whole lot of flexibility, pathways. But what exactly is?
Many of the NEP policies are existing Delhi Technological University, and actually we have modified our curriculum in such a way that by selecting electives properly, a computer science engineering student can get a major degree in computer science engineering and minor in economics. So actually this way we help the students to do multidisciplinary, encourage students to do work with multidisciplinary subjects of their choice. So this is something which is NEP is promoting, because NEP is basically looking into an teaching learning process which is beyond the boundaries of conventional disciplines or traditional disciplines. So this is something which we are doing already. And similarly, we give MOOC courses, like we accept MOOC courses. Students can do MOOC courses, which is available maybe from Stanford or IITs. So that credits we give them if they complete the course. Exchange programs are also there in Delhi Technological University. With the foreign universities, it can be done. And we have already started research culture in the undergraduate level, which led to improvement of positions and all. And currently we are actually looking for this integrated courses, which is one of the major concern of NEP, with multiple outlets. This we will be implementing soon. So the implementation of NEP in true sense will definitely make the Indian academy
So, if
higher
I understand you correctly, there are a
step
couple of elements
higher.
to what is happening
Yes.
as a result of NEP. One is the multidisciplinary introduction. That means one can have a multidisciplinary approach when we enroll for any education in any of the higher education institutes. Number two is that about articulation, that we will get credit for something that we may have done from some other colleges, and there must be some basis for that credit recognition. Number three is that there is research which has been introduced at the undergraduate level, a stronger focus on research. These are some of the elements that I can make out from your discussion. Now let me come back to the basic topic between industry, academy, and startup collaboration and ecosystem. And I suppose the first question which comes to my mind is that how much of the research work which is happening is actually getting commercialized? I understand that globally the figure is around 5%. Would that be right? Or for that
It
matter,
is.
would that be
It is
right?
right. Yes.
Yes,
It is
What about
definitely.
you, Ritu? You are also from an industry perspective. Hmm. Do you undertake any collaborations with academia? And what kind of commercialization rates are you seeing?
Yeah, definitely. As you said, right, the commercialization, whatever we do, the research we do, and the prototypes that we create. So the journey from from the prototype to productization is very low. I understand that, right? And there is a drive actually. How do we actually encourage people in the industry as well as in the academia to collaborate and bring about that change. So recently there have been two initiatives that from Intel have started. One is how do we first I'll just mention about one thing that uh, when we talk about empowering, or maybe telling students that how do we empower them to understand how the industry. So once they complete their graduation, so how do we do them, how do we train them in that, right? They are able to work towards to our standards. It's not just Intel, it's actually a collaboration that is happening at a greater level. People from Wipro, Intel, a curriculum which help the students knowledge for or maybe train them three
So
level.
let me ask you this, Ritu, that yes, there are initiatives which are happening in to build up industry academia collaboration, but does this percolate to the startup ecosystem?
Not exactly, because from Intel perspective, as I mentioned earlier, also Intel is very conservative. So it is a slow process from Intel side, but yeah, it is happening. I will not say they are
Understand.
restrictive. Yeah, it happen slowly and gradually happen, but yeah, it is happening.
Okay,
We
understand.
do encourage.
ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞോണ്ടിരിക്കുവാ.
So
Go on.
let me ask now another, go on a different track and go to Indu. Indu,
Yes, sir.
how many seats do you have, or how many students do you have joining every year?
We have around 2,000 students in BTech level are joining in BTech courses,
And
and
what is
MTech around 500
so you've got about 2000 at BTech level and 500 at the postgraduate level.
and postgraduate.
Now, how is the recruitment of these people done? Do they have to sit for an exam or something like that, or how does it happen?
Yes, we have actually collaboration with many industries, and they will be coming for recruiting the students starting from the 7th semester of the students itself.
Yes,
And
yes, but you are
mostly,
talking, understand, but you are talking about when they finish the studies. I am not, my apologies. What I meant was, what do the students have to, what is the criteria for the students to get admission into DCE?
DC, it's basically the JEE examination, JEE main examination they have to clear, and on the basis of the rank, they'll be admitted.
So, which means, in other words, that you don't have to do any marketing to get any students.
Yeah, no, not at all.
So
It's not
there's an
required.
overflow of people competing to get into places like DCE, because DCE is a very good institute. Now the question is that in that context, are you really bothered about the rankings?
In that context, we are not really bothered about the rankings. It's not not really. Only thing is that now government give funds if you have such positions. That is why we participate for ranking.
Yes.
Otherwise.
So that is exactly the situation in the top colleges over here in India. Is when you look at it, I mean, there are 10 times or 100 times more number of students wanting to get into these top and the situation in terms of alternate career paths hasn't exactly taken shape in places where there are 1.4 billion people and the opportunities are much less. And here also I go back to Ritu, and Ritu, I would ask you is that, do rankings matter when you recruit students?
Okay. Uh, so it does matter. So we do go to the top institutes for our hirings, and but recently, they have started with the NITs and IITs, where we go and uh, the basically what you call those that uh, mm, at institute level you have those talent hunt recruiters or something, right?
Hmm.
Right. So they are there. They select a bunch of students. Those students, that list would come to us at Intel, and based on their interest, they'll be interviewed into different uh, orgs, or basically different departments within Intel, and they'll be taken up for internships. So that internship is for a year. So they will be basically trained how Intel works, what is the process at Intel, what work we do at Intel, and how the things, everything is, they'll be trained according to that. And based on the merit, still they have to appear for an interview across different departments. And if they clear that interview, they'll be hired. So basically, we call them as recent college graduates. Their interview is then converted into a permanent job. So that percentage, that is also very low. I would like to mention that.
So and
So
and
yeah,
that
there is some.
absolutely, you brought out another very interesting question, and for that I will now go to Indu. Indu, do you see that there is a gap between the skills which are being taught at higher education systems and what the industry wants?
Yes, yes, there is definitely a gap, but actually the curriculum modifications which we are doing, like we have done with the this NXP semiconductors, Qualcomm, and Cadence in our department, in electronics department, we have modified the syllabus of VLSI design subject, and with that itself, many of them got placed at very high, with very high salary in Qualcomm and all. So such kind of things, if we, that is industrial collaboration is very much needed for students so that they can start the work from the beginning. At the same time, actually students will go for internship, like in the third year we have companies will come, pick up students, good students, they will train them during the because we have a compulsory training internship for of 6-8 months required for completing their curriculum. So students will go for that and they'll train them, and then most of them will be absorbed in the company. That way also we are related with industries. Industry will come, pick up good students, they'll train them during their pre-final year, and then they'll give placement there itself, pre-placement offer. That is also happening.
So, which could also be into as a matter of fact, because you are getting the best quality of students as inputs to
Yes,
either
yes,
IIT
that
or
is.
DCE. So therefore, the companies are not looking so much in terms of what is their training, but what is their potential. Hmm.
Yes, yes.
So therefore, that industry academia alignment to what extent really doesn't matter, because end of the day it really comes down to. And again, I go back to Ritu. Ritu, do you hire only from the top institutes like IITs, DCEs, etc., or do you also go down elsewhere?
We do go down. That's, yeah, I mentioned, right? We do go down to other colleges also. So as I see, right, we have picked up there's a private universities also in South, right? We do go there. We pick up people for internships. We train them as per our workflows, and we there are we absorb them also, but yeah, so that's a separate
Understood.
process that we go. And like earlier you mentioned, right, is there a gap between what is taught at institutes and what we actually do? There is a gap. That's the reason SCOM and industries came forward, and we started building. This is only I'm talking about the silicon industry, that we came together and we are designing curriculums where we train students into using certain tools that are common across industries, and people should know it, because there is a gap. That gap, and we want to fill that gap. We want to design a curriculum where about a 6 curriculum be either sponsored by CDAC, or maybe NASCOM itself will see where to get started from which institute. They are still into it, and we have one round of curriculum already designed. So we are still looking for how to deploy it.
Sure.
That
Let me now go to the last question of the day, and that comes down to emerging technologies. And let me kickstart the discussion with Ritu. Ritu, how much of a focus on emerging technologies is there at DCE, or for that matter, at higher education institutes?
In DTU, sir?
Or how
Uh,
much
okay, okay.
focus is there on emerging technologies? Let's say
Yes, yes,
IoT,
we
AR,
have now
VR.
actually, we have all these, we like students can take elective courses. So all these elective courses are being floated, like AI, machine learning, AR, VR, uh, that actually all part of artificial intelligence, then computer vision, image processing, everything is being floated, and students are going into that because coding is the passion for nowadays for all students. So people are into it. They're studying in the university, they are going outside and getting trained from other places also, maybe from industry or for other teaching, like courses which available online they are doing. So we are focusing. Everybody is focusing
So
on this
I
new
love your
emerging
response.
technology.
I love your response, and let me give you an example. The last 6 months have seen a massive rise in interest and a massive investment cycle in something called metaverse. Now, are we teaching anything about metaverse?
I
Not at the
no,
moment.
no,
See,
not
okay.
yet.
So the point I'm trying to bring about is that how long would it take for higher education institutes to start kind of aligning that fast with industry trends? So just out of curiosity, I thought, because you see, I also realize that you see at the moment in the top institutes, you know, they try as much as possible to align with the market needs, but because they're getting the best students, it's really, it becomes yes something to do kind of a thing. And let me now go across to Ritu and ask Ritu. Ritu, in regard to emerging technologies, how much of our exposure or how much of the work which is happening at the moment in Intel in India does involve, emerging technologies?
Yeah, yeah. So definitely, one perspective that I saw, and that's a very big change for Intel, you know, uh, how the chip designing part, you know, that was actually a manual process. You have certain tools that are available, and they people, spent about a year in designing a circuit, and the complexity of the circuit and kind of performance, power and performance that we want to deliver to the customers today. So with that, I see a lot of change, because now people are adopting to AI ML, and they want to explore how we can do a design, circuit design. So that's one thing that people at Intel are exploring too much. And as you mentioned about metaverse, right? So recently, when we were validating our platforms, right, we saw that people were thinking, since metaverse is something that is like everyone is talking about, and can our platforms support that? How do we test it? You know, because we see our competitors like Nvidia,
Mm.
AMD, right? They are ahead of us on some certain things, right? Yeah, we definitely are looking into how we can improve our performances with respect to how the metaverse kind of technology is coming up. So is it really into our redesign our platforms, or is it more on both, or the trade-off that is there between performance, energy consumptions, and so these are certain things that are being
Fabulous.
addressed.
Fabulous. This has been absolutely a fabulous discussion. And let me also share with the group that you see, I have launched an initiative which is focused on emerging trends, where we are looking at an integrated view of future of work, future of education, future of skills, and the different kind of pathways which are emerging. And one of the streams out of that is also industry, academia, startup, collaborative ecosystems. And both Ritu and Indu, along with number of other IIT Delhi PhD, both from industry, academy, and various institutes, are involved in the same initiative. And very soon I'll reach out to the broad group. If anybody is interested, we can happily get you more involved. So with that, a big thank you to both Ritu as well as Indu. It was absolutely fabulous to talk to you today and get that discussion between industry and academia, and to look at what is happening at the grassroots level. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause to Ritu and to Indu, and look forward to engaging with both of you as we go further down and get you more involved with the huge alumni community and the huge platform that we are building. So, with that, this is Pradeep from
Thank,
Sydney signing off. I
thank you.
have a lovely morning tea, afternoon glass of lassi, or evening glass of wine, whatever it is in your part of the world. Take care till the next GCC episode, where we will be covering the Ashoka University story. We'll have one of the founders from Ashoka University, talking about it. And we will also have a wonderful person from US talking about the incubation and the innovation ecosystems and how people can take advantage of that and what is the best path forward. So stay tuned and bye for now.